Hello, my name is Seven, and I acquired 2 walnut slabs to craft a dining table for 6. You'll be surprised at how many things can go wrong, and at the will of a man to push through. Well, I am. Here I am, rough cutting the slabs for future flexibility, which, luckily, will turn out to be useful later in the project. I start by cleaning off the grime and checking moisture levels to ensure the table will outlast me. Once I'm confident the slabs are free of woodworms and trapped moisture, I move on to deep cleaning whatever residue remains from the sawmill. This is slab number 2. It has 2 large cracks, or rather chasms, one of which eventually splits and a piece leaves the main land to form its own slab. We'll call it slab 3 until further notice. I counted 68 rings on what was once a tree. However, the last 20 rings are close together, meaning this tree endured 20 dry seasons before it eventually rotted. By the way, if you don't have time to listen to me rambling, you can watch an 8-minute version of this video on the channel. Anyway, this entire cleaning and debarking session took 6 hours using the simple tools I have. It was evident that the slabs were twisted to a ridiculous degree, so I set up a flattening jig. First, I woke myself up, then cut 2 unistruts to size. I also cut 10 or so threaded rods to size. Then, I changed angle grinder's disc from cutting to grinding to clean all the rough edges. So this is my state-of-the-art flattening jig. I am happy with being slightly inaccurate, as I suspect I will have to redo this whole thing after the epoxy pour. Here I am, raising the unistruts by placing equal-sized scrap pieces of ply underneath. Now that the unistruts are resting prouder than the slab, I can screw everything in place with the all threads that I cut earlier. Wow, that was a long sentence. In short, spacer plus unistrut, higher than the slabs. Then I levelled everything with more ply scraps and bridged the jig with a trimmer, skate slade thingy-mabob that I made earlier. I'm not joking, you can see me making it in my first video. Then I went to town with the router. What you see here is a cheapo China job router with an even cheaper router bit screaming for help. And screaming more, and even more. When done with the surfacing, I measured everything 10 times because the next step is epoxy pouring. If I make a mistake there, this table project might suddenly turn into a cutting board project. Then I sanded the slabs to 80 grit. This was totally unnecessary, but I did it anyways for my visual pleasure. Now, I can focus on Kintsugi part. The first step is to fill small cracks with golden colour epoxy. I'll shut up for a while for your ASMR pleasure. Hello, me again. I just wanted to mention that here I was, making sure only the edges are golden colour. Now, it is time for the big pour. I filled larger holes with scrap wood and taped everything to form multiple small moulds. Then, I mixed a pearlescent black epoxy in my trusty old bucket and braced for the big moment. I'll leave you to it. I never thought this would happen to me, but here we are. Now, I have 35 minutes to recover the epoxy, create a mould from duct tape and pour the spillage back into the mould. I managed to pull it all off in 26 minutes and came back a few days later. The epoxy was rock solid, so I moved on to bonding slabs 2 and 3 with epoxy. At this point, I must have lost self-confidence because instead of pouring the epoxy in between slabs 2 and 3, I spent an hour or so aligning the slabs with old-school dowels. I mean, look at the situation. I completely gave up on power tools, even sanding the dowels for added nothing. What I see, a totally broken man. Out of all the tools I have, hammers are my favourite. Nothing beats a good old beating. Stay tuned for a mallet making video. Wink wink. Lessons learnt. I thought duct tape was gaffer tape in Yanklish. Turns out duct tape can be a thick packaging tape or gaffer tape. Anyway, I am doing this pour with gaffer tape. As a building services engineer, I can assure you that we don't use any of those tapes on ventilation ducts. Flanges are the way to go. What kind of barbaric monster uses tape to connect ducts anyway? Watch me here, making fine furniture with a belt sander. I'm not even sure why I own one. Now that the slabs are prepped, I can epoxy them together. Before that, I'll add a few screws here and there because the tree bark is quite weak. Screws will give epoxy something to bite into. This is the last time I am touching epoxy on this project. What a relief. I am not working with epoxy for at least a month after this. After a few days, I flipped the table over to see what happened to its top. Surprise, surprise, epoxy leached through and cut the table. Here you see me checking for flatness. Unfortunately, it is dead flat, meaning it won't be flat after sanding the excess epoxy. I'll just leave you to watch my misery in silence. Boy, was it deafening. Anyway, I thought I could plane it flat. Turns out it was a lot of work planing epoxy and walnut. My arm fell off quarter the way, so I turned to my good old flattening jig. This took no effort and 20 minutes to make the table dead flat. I started by filling the micro holes with super glue. Apparently, YouTubers call it CA glue for some reason. I mean, it clearly says super glue on the tin, but what do I know? Anyway, I sanded the glue once it had hardened. I might have used a hardening agent, or maybe I didn't. Honestly, I don't remember. It was late and I was tired, so I called it a day and forgot what I was going to say. The next day I woke up bright and early. No, I didn't. I work from home, I always wake up knackered. Anyway, I set up my circular saw to cut the table to size. It didn't take more than 10 minutes and the table was almost done. Top was flat, underneath wasn't rough, and it was a almost rectangle. So this is me using the saw gingerly, in case you would like to poke fun at. Now it's time to hard wax the underside of the table, but first I need to install the hardware for the legs. I bought these legs from a local business. They're made of steel, professionally finished, and most importantly, not too expensive, because I'm already on the verge of blowing the budget. By the way, I've been advised to use 8th grader English in my YouTube videos, but I politely declined. Let me know in the comments if you prefer a simpler, more concise style. These are called threaded inserts. They have threads, and you insert them into the material. Sounds like translated from German. Anyway, I am using M6 inserts here, 1/4 inch in AR 15 units. I repeat, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. I am extra cautious as the drill bit I used was imperial, so the hole was, tight. Here I am, debating with myself on how to approach the finishing process. Then I go full chaotic neutral. Now I can wax the underside of the table. At first, I used the nearest flat object I could find, but the screeching sound it made gave me the ick. I am so zoomer. Anyway, in that horror moment, I lost some footage while grabbing the squeegee and finishing the job. I started the new day with fine sanding the tabletop to 240 grit. Then I made a wood filler by mixing hard wax oil and sawdust. Back in the day, the recipe was vegetable oil, beeswax and sawdust. This recipe is at least 200 years old. My great-great-grandfather, and maybe a few more greats, would use it to fill imperfections in horse carriage wheels. I hope he wasn't a cowboy carpenter giving the wheels a quick fix just to charge for another repair the next year. I had car polishing compound laying around, so I applied that to epoxy surfaces carefully and cleaned the table with rubbing alcohol. My rag is bigger than yours. Now that's out of my system. I can leave you with some more ASMR footage. I applied one more coat of wax off camera and didn't buff too much to avoid reflection, as this table will live here under the pergola. I am applying this automotive ceramic coating as it was crowned in one of Project Farm videos. The tabletop is finally finished. All that's left is attaching the legs. Since I had prepared all the hardware beforehand, this part was a breeze. I attached the first leg using M6 bolts. These aren't furniture bolts. They have a built-in washer that helps distribute the tension, so the uneven surface doesn't bend the steel as much. Have a look for yourself. Attaching the second leg probably would have made Sir Isaac Newton proud in his grave. The cantilever action and foot support trick were such a graceful display of Newtonian physics in action. Now for the most important part, testing structural rigidity. I applied 800 newtons of force and measured that the deflection was within spec. I gave it a pass certificate and walked off into the sunset. What do you call a table that's afraid of commitment? A side table. What did the bar table say to the pub table? You're just here for the fun, but I'm in it for the long haul. Why did the table always get dumped? It had a reputation for being too unstable,